Welcome, people. My name is Dr. George Sparks. We got a really interesting program today. Our special guest, once again, is Dr. David Graves, PhD from Aberdeen University in Scotland. He is actually not in Aberdeen today. He's over in Portugal, right? Is that correct?
Yes, Madeira,
And
Portugal.
we got a number of different topics that we have. Very interesting. He taught at Oxford University, also Liberty University, School of Divinity. He traveled extensively in the Middle East on a Mount Ararat project. I think you're also writing a book on that now, or you just did a podcast I read on YouTube. Was it YouTube or Facebook?
Oh, I just finished a video on that. I'm working the book on the history of biblical archaeology.
And that sounds really interesting. Also on the Temple Mount Sifting program. He's also been at Qumran, Shiloh, the Shiloh excavation in Israel. And he was my square supervisor at Tel El Hammam in Jordan, where he excavated for over 15 years. And he discovered Livius, the city of Livius. We were looking at the book of the seven churches. Jesus speaks to the seven churches. But today we're going to do something completely different. It's going to be very exciting. And this is going to be on inscriptions. First, the one is going to be called Ketov Hinnom. I'm not going to give it away. The second one is the Copper Scroll. If you're aware of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this one's just as fantastic. I believe it is now in a museum in Jordan. And also, finally, the Nash Papyri. So we got three topics. Hopefully we get to them all very interesting, got great history behind them. Some of the top discoveries, I believe, in biblical archaeology. So, Dr. Graves, welcome to the program. I don't want to delay because I know this is going to be a great, great topic.
Great, George. Thanks for having me. We normally talk about, archaeology with artifacts and structures and buildings and coins and pottery. But today I want to talk about three important papyrus or ancient manuscripts that deal with the Old Testament. And they're the probably oldest copies of the Old Testament that we have. So we're going to look at three of them. The first one is called the Ketef Hinnom amulet, or better known probably as the silver amulet or silver scroll. It was discovered in 1979 at Ketef Hinnom, that's just outside of Jerusalem. Gabriel Barkay was working there, the famous Israeli archaeologist, and a good friend of mine, Gordon Franz, was there and discovered it together. It had Proto-Hebrew alphabet on it that dates back to about 650 to 587 BC, pre-exilic, so before the time of the exile. And apart from their significance for our knowledge of the development of the Hebrew alphabet, the scroll preserved the earliest known citation of biblical text, the priestly blessing, found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 and 26. So here we have a part or a piece of the Hebrew Bible discovered in situ, in location. So this wasn't found on the antiquities market, but was found when they were doing the excavation, so we know it's legitimate. Now, there are different scripts from many different periods, but this one was used to date it to this time period because of the type of script that was used for the priestly blessing found in Numbers 6. It's an amulet. It was probably used as probably one of the phylactery that the priests put on their heads, or they might put it on a doorpost as a priestly blessing. So it was written around 600 BC. That's the first temple period, the time of Solomon's temple. And it's the oldest known text that we have of the Hebrew Bible, written in Proto-Hebrew, or the Old Hebrew. The next one that we have, and it's, as I said, this one's called the Silver Scroll. And it was written, it was actually typed into, or not typed, but inscribed onto a piece of silver and then rolled up, and that's why it had been preserved. Not papyrus or animal skin, but on a piece of silver. The next one is from the Dead Sea Scrolls, is the copper scroll. So here we have two pieces, or two inscriptions on metal, one on silver, and now this one's on copper, that we have from the Bible, the Old Testament. This one was discovered in cave number 3 of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It dates to around 50 to 100 AD. The copper scroll was found in situ again, on location in the cave by archaeologists in 1952. Most of the scrolls that we know of from the Dead Sea Scrolls were described by the Bedouin who sold them to the antiquities market, but this one actually was found in situ by archaeologists in 1952. The cave 3, it's actually the furthest cave from Qumran to the north, and it had 12 biblical and non-biblical scrolls in it. And had a copy of the Jubilee, which was a Essenian text. The copper scroll was unique because it's the only one that we have from the Dead Sea Scrolls that was written on metal. It was made of copper, and about 1% of tin, but although the metallic copper remains in the stripes, it was cut up into stripes and into pieces, cylinders. It had converted to metal into brittle oxide, so it had sort of deteriorated over time. There are 3 sheets totaling about 240 centimeters or 2.4 meters. That's for the Americans, it's 7.9 feet in length. It was cut into 23 different strips in order to read it because they couldn't unroll it. It was deteriorating. It was written in Hebrew Mishnaic dialect, so a very early form of Hebrew. Originally, it was photographed and published, but not very well. Millick published his official edition in 1962 of it with handwritten transcriptions, though the accompanying black and white photographs were not very legible. They were unclear and so difficult to see. And then in 1988, it was rephotographed with more precision, and we get a clearer image of it that has been translated. It's not a literary work, which is very interesting. It's not one of the passages of the Bible, but rather it describes a hidden treasure. It's almost like we're going back into Indiana Jones here. And it lists 64 places where various items of gold and silver were buried or hidden. Unfortunately, they have never discovered any of the locations, so we don't know whether it's just sort of myth or whether it is a true treasure document, hidden treasure somewhere. So they're still trying to figure all of that out. Some people have suggested that the Ark of the Covenant is buried among those things, those items somewhere, and people have been searching, and Indiana Jones has been busy looking for stuff.
That would make a great movie, though.
It would make a great movie, yes, and they certainly did a good one. So, this is a unique manuscript that's unlike any of the other Dead Sea Scrolls that we've discovered. Many of them were from the Essene community. They're religious documents. We have copies of the entire Old Testament in the Dead Sea Scrolls, except for the exact quotes of Esther, but they have found some references to Esther in some of the scrolls. But this one is the only one that we have that is a treasure document. It was originally taken by the Jordanians because they were in control of the Qumran area, the Dead Sea Scroll area in the 1950s. Because it was under their control, the copper scroll went to the Jordanian Archaeological Museum on Amman's Citadel Hill, and it was there until about 2014 when it moved to the newly opened Jordanian Museum down in Amman in 2014, which it is on display there now, and you can go and see it. All of the slices of the copper scroll are on display, and you can view it there. So that's a unique individual on the copper scroll, which was kind of interesting and unique from archaeology. The next one I want to talk about is the Nash Papyrus. Now, this is interesting because it was discovered in Egypt, probably in the region of Fayum, in Fayum, Egypt. It's unique because it is 4 papyrus parchments and fragments written in Hebrew. The dates from about 150 to 100 BC, and it is the earliest record of the Decalogue or the Ten Commandments. So it is a record of the Ten Commandments. It's now in the Cambridge Museum in the UK. And Exodus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 5 includes the Shema, the priestly blessing, and Deuteronomy 6 verses 4 and 5. And it had close similarities with the Greek Septuagint. This is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And it differs significantly from the Masoretic text. That is the Masoretic text is the Hebrew text that we have. And it's the oldest Old Testament text before the Dead Sea Scrolls that we have. And it was actually not found, but it was found in the antiquities market in the 1st century BC, and it was first identified by a fellow by the name of Nash, W.L. Nash, and Nash bought it from an Egyptian dealer, and Nash was actually the secretary of the Society of Biblical Archaeology in 1898, and the papyrus is of unknown provenance. We don't know exactly where it's come from, but most allege and believe that it came from the Fayum district of cemeteries and graves that were located there. And then he offered the papyrus to Cambridge University in 1903, and the text was first reported by Stanley Cook in 1903 and published. And we have the text now. That the first time it came to light basically was in 1903, even though Nash had discovered it or had acquired it from the antiquities dealers in the 1800s. This was the first time it was published. So it's very significant because now we have a copy of the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue, and the Shema, the priestly blessing, and this is now has come to light. So these are 3 very important documents, one on silver, one on bronze, and the other one on papyrus. And we have 3 different types of records now of the Old Testament text. I understand you've got a story about the Adam.
Well, I was going to shoot my mouth off. I was going to say, but nothing on lead. Okay, nothing. All right, kind of like an inside little joke there, maybe. But this is what happened. This was back in 2001. And I don't believe Israel and Palestine were going at it. And I kind of looked at that as an opportunity because there's no tourism. Everything's shut down. So I went over there, number one, because I wanted to photograph archaeological sites with no tourists. That's a great opportunity to do that. Also, I wanted to go frequent and visit the antiquity dealers over there. Now I know that in the academic community that can be taboo. Don't mess with the antiquity market if you're in academics. But the truth is, we still venture over there on occasions. Maybe not all of us, but I like to go over there. And I got friends that are in the antiquity market, and I still like to go over there and say hi and see what's up. Because you never know. You never know. Just like the Nash Papyrus. You never know. Is it completely kosher. I agree. It's not, but stuff happens. And hopefully it ends up in a museum. That's what I always hope for when I see something that is significant that it ends up in a museum. So I went over there to see what's at the antiquity market because everything would be dirt cheap because there's no tourism. And number two, to take pictures of archaeological sites. I wasn't there on a pleasure cruise, so I stayed at a hospice. I believe it was a church in the Zion region, and I think it's called. It was a Presbyterian church. I think it was called St. George, and it's right above Pitofino, where they found the silver scroll.
Okay.
Now it's kind of interesting because in Judaism, of course, they keep their cemeteries all away from their dwellings and their places of worship. But in Christianity, I don't know what happened, Dr. Grace, but if the church is old enough, you've been to like a New England church, they'll have the wealthy people that benefactors of the church buried in the walls. Then they'll have the bishop buried in the basement. Then they'll have the deacon somewhere on the floor, and everybody's got their little plaque and maybe even a little nameplate by the seat that they once sat in. It's completely different for us. Well, anyway, I use this as a kind of an idea that this church, and I wish I would have looked this up before we started the podcast, but I think it was called St. George Presbyterian. And it was built in 1927. It was a hospice that cost me about $200 a week. And it had a bed, and it had a sink, and it had a window and a shower, and that was it. So no luxuries. Now, when I got done with my little escapades during the day, I'd get something to eat and then go to the library. And in the library, they had these old black and white photos framed. So when I saw the pastor there, I said, what are these pictures of? Because it kind of looked unique, but I couldn't place it. It's like seeing if you're used to being at work and everybody's got uniforms on, and then they're hard to recognize in public when they're wearing civilian clothes. So here's something that's out of place and I can't recognize it. So I asked the pastor, he goes, those been there since I've been here. He goes, I have no idea. But he told me, he said, a group of tourists led by a guide would come up the driveway and look over the fence. Now, at this time, I believe they were building it's a new structure. If it was called the Menachem Begin building, I'm not sure. So they had, the fence was kind of large. They took the little fence out and they put the bigger fence up because now there's a construction project there.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'm 5'8", and at that time I weighed about 220 pounds. I was a pretty hefty little boy. And I looked over the fence and it was Katofino. I thought, oh my gosh, I want to photograph that. So here's the building construction, right? And then the big fence going around it. And since it's a construction fence, I was looking for a weak spot in the fence. So I could go under it, try to go over it. But remember that I was kind of big. So I was going up, I was going under it, and I was all covered in dirt. And finally I gave up. And I went over to where the front door of the building was. And I went in, I went up some steps. And they looked at me as in horror because I was wearing that typical archaeological stuff, brown on brown, all covered in mud. And they look at me and I said, is there any way I could look at Katufinom in the back? And they have that Israeli slang when they're speaking English, And he looks at me and he says, he goes, go outside. And around the back, there is a fence with a door. He goes, it's always open. Now, it's always open. Here I was digging, trying to get under and over and all that, and I could have went around and asked and went through a fence. Sometimes they say it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. This time it was easier to get permission. And I went in and took the pictures of Katofinom, where Gabriel by Ty and his excavating team found the silver scroll.
Yeah.
And there's a story behind that that's quite unique.
Yeah. Yeah. My good friend, Gordon Franz, actually was the one who discovered it, apparently. Gabriel Barquet, I worked with Gabe at the Temple Mount Sifting Project. He was in charge of that. Gordon, I've known him for quite a long time. He's with the Associates for Biblical Research, ABR. And Gordon was on staff there, and he was the one working with Gabe on that and discovered it back in 1979. So that's quite a while ago. So it's quite an important site.
Now, was he a kid when he discovered it?
He's about my age, so
He wasn't a kid.
79, I guess. Yeah, he would be a young archaeologist. He'd been working in Israel for a number of years at a number of different sites. So he's quite a prominent archaeologist in his own right. But yeah, he was the one on the team at the time that discovered it. And I got that information from him. I think it's posted on the internet somewhere. But anyway, just you never know what you're going to turn up when you're excavating, and what part of a discovery you might be with when you sign up as a volunteer or even as a supervisor on a dig. So encourage people, if they want to, take in some of these excavations, do so. Many of them are being destroyed and being enveloped by modern civilization. It's important that we get in there and start to preserve the past.
The silver scroll, what does that date back to? The 6th century, so 5 something?
650 to about 587 BC.
Okay. So it could be the Second Temple period up into the destruction of the Second Temple. So we could put date the tombs at the same time as that.
Yeah, pre-exilic, so it's before the exile.
And the priestly benediction was what was on the Lord bless thee and keep thee, and his face shine upon you. That's what was, so it's probably the earliest inscription outside of the biblical narrative that we have is on the silver scroll. And then we go to the copper scroll. Like you said, it's not parchment. It's actually copper, which would be kind of odd, but it is virtually, it's a treasure map, is it not?
Treasure instructions. We have some 64 different places that are mentioned. So where the gold and the silver is hidden. So it's not scripture, it's not biblical, but it's very intriguing, very unique piece of text. Of course, we have other biblical texts found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that are important, biblically speaking, but I just think that the silver, the copper are unique scrolls that we have that need to be recognized. They help to shed light onto the biblical text. And then, of course, the Nash papyrus, which is found in Egypt, quite a few miles away, but it has the text of Scripture on it, of the Decalogue or the Ten Commandments. One of the earliest recordings we have of that. With the Shema on it as well. We have lots of indication of people writing down texts on different types of materials and keeping them, preserving them for their parents, for their ancestry, for future generations.
Now, for our listening audience, if one wants to go see the silver scroll, it's located at the Israel Museum?
The silver scroll is in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. It's numbered IAA 1980 to 1995 and IIA 1980-1996. There's different pieces, I think there's 3 or 4 pieces of it that have been preserved.
And then if you want to if somebody wants to see the copper scroll, that's in Jordan.
The copper scroll is in Jordan in the Amman Museum, downtown Amman now. It's a big, beautiful museum. They just built it in 2014 when it opened. I've been there, and it's worth a visit. They have many, many artifacts. They've moved the copper scroll from the old Citadel Museum, which is quite small, but actually worth a visit. They still have artifacts there, but they've moved all the important stuff to the downtown Amman Museum, Jordan Museum in Amman, and it's worth a visit. Beautifully done. Like I said, it's modern. Things are well labeled and well preserved and well displayed. They weren't so well displayed and so well documented in the old museum, but they've upgraded it, so it's worth a visit.
Okay, then the last one, the National Papyrus, where is that located?
That's Cambridge University in the UK, in London, England, or in Cambridge, England. So you have to go to England to see that at the university. I'm not sure whether it's on display or whether you'd have to request to see it. It's manuscript OR 233.
Each one of those is pretty fantastic. You know, I never got the opportunity to see the copper scrolls, but the silver scrolls, yes, I've seen that. The copper scrolls would. I just think that would be a fantastic movie. What if they, of course, Hollywood, you can think of so many different angles to it.
Yes.
Like maybe, they cut it into sections because you couldn't unroll it because it was too brittle. And I think it was discovered in the early 1950s, either 51 or 52.
52.
It's been known for quite a while now. And
Yeah.
I think there's actually been people that have tried to locate some treasure, but I can't read it, but the translation is pretty vague, is it not? It's like, by the cobbler's house, 20 steps, and then take a right, and then 3 feet down, there'll be a chest. And okay, well, you might have known where the cobbler's house was 2,000 years ago, but where's it at now?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people have tried to find it. It's one of those mysteries that they haven't solved. No one's come up with the goods, as far as I know. Folks out there have discovered something from that scroll. I'd be glad to hear about it, but no, I haven't heard anything. And yeah, it was pretty interesting, pretty unique. So mysteries happen all the time. Treasure maps are around. They've been around since we've been kids. So everybody's trying to find treasure.
I appreciate your times that you spent with us, because I know you're busy and you've been traveling, and the weather there is pretty rough right now. The photograph behind you, that's not Portugal, is it?
No, that's Qumran. That's where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and up the valley to in the other direction. I guess it's over there. Yeah, up on that direction is where the cave number 3 is located. They found the copper scroll in 1952. So good to be with you again, George, as always. And perhaps next time we'll talk about another some other famous artifacts from the Old Testament or New Testament.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Doctor.
You're welcome.